welcome to the Great Women in Compliance podcast with Hema Lomax and Lisa Fine, sponsored by Corporate Compliance Insights. We are also a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Today, my guest is not really a guest. She's so much more. She's an architect of GWIC, my first partner in compliance. In fact, my first compliance friend, who is still a dear friend that I'll be seeing in about a week. She coined the phrase, send the elevator back down, taught me all about tall poppy syndrome, and I'm still using her cheat codes. If you don't know who this is yet, you haven't listened to the podcast. I have Mary Shirley here. She's back. So, Mary, I'm so excited about this. And can you update everybody on the cool things you've been doing since you became the, as we call it, the GWIC Emerita? And I'm still hoping that catches on as a hashtag.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you to yourself and Hema for having me and featuring me as a guest today. As we may have talked about a little bit in the past, I'm still teaching at Fordham and George Mason University, so a little around the corner from you. I'm really thrilled as well to have gotten my first Chief Compliance Officer role at Scion Health. Loving having a CEO, my boss, who really does have strong tone from the top and visibly demonstrates commitment to compliance and a culture of integrity, which honestly, you can't ask for more. Continuing with my keynote speaking for vendors and for compliance departments at Compliance Week events, still pitching in and really thrilled with life in general. How about yourself? How have you been doing?
I've been doing pretty well. It's been a really interesting time in terms of being at a dual listed company, what the UK and the US are doing. Working on this podcast and being able to, do some of the different roundtables has been a lot of fun. I'm still out there doing some of the speaking and other things and hanging out with the great dog of compliance, Rocky, who may or may not, usually interrupts our calls. And it's really, I think it's an interesting time, both in the field and in the world. And I am learning a lot, and I've spent a lot of time lately just failure to prevent fraud in the UK. And the longer you do this kind of work, as you know, the more you start learning about things that you never really thought would become such a huge part of your life.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but is there anything in the failure to prevent fraud readings and following of what's developing there that you find interesting?
I think it's really interesting how that sort of flipping some things about fraud and making it looked at much more similarly to compliance programs. So instead of saying just investigate, right now you're like fraud. So I think the first thing I think is really interesting is this saying you need to have the procedures in place ahead of time. If you're a large company, you can't just only wait to recoup after something goes wrong. The second part is that there's a consumer focus. It's not just is fraud perpetrated against you, but what is your organization doing? Make sure that you're protecting customers, third parties, others. And I mean, who knows how it will play out in reality? It's just coming into place. But I just think it's one of those things that's just really interesting to see how all the different things that different countries and organizations are doing to figure it out are happening. I think it's really, really interesting. It also helps you, another part of building a culture of integrity, which is something that you've lived in so many countries and you've been in 3 very different US states between Massachusetts, California, and now Tennessee. Given all that, what do you see as the principles of a culture of integrity, regardless of geography, industry, business?
Yeah, there are certain things as being an international compliance practitioner yourself that need customization. But I think one of the really nice things about fostering a culture of integrity is that essentially the ingredients are applicable across the board. And so if I were to describe the essential elements of a culture of integrity, I would suggest psychological safety first and foremost. And I won't go into too much detail on what that is. The listeners of this podcast are very familiar with that concept and the importance of it. Secondly, I think the accountability to own and commit to a shared set of values that are enshrined around doing the right thing. Thirdly, transparency, not just transparency specifically for the sake of transparency. So not just when you're in trouble, when you're backed up against the wall and in a corner. And finally, reliability, which I think is pretty all-encompassing. And what I mean by that is that the community of stakeholders is true to their word. And no matter how privileged or powerful one might be, that everybody is held to the same set of standards as everybody else.
Yeah, I think all those things are really sensible and really important. I also think on the flip side too, the more senior you are, the more responsibility you have to actually know and live up to these things. Not that other people don't, but you're not only a standard bearer, but you need to know the red flags as well as actually not doing them. And I think it's just so important to realize it's like Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility if you are that senior person. So
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, with the US laws, obviously there have been changes within the PAWS and the FCPA and the new laws in the UK and in the EU, which is one of the things we were just coincidentally, surprisingly talking about with failure to prevent fraud. Are you seeing any shifts in how you're defining or communicating culture of integrity at a time where so many of these things are happening?
I think people are grasping onto it even more. And of course, we've seen the shift from compliance being rules-based to values-based for quite some time. And there's potentially still quite a lot more that we can see in terms of the spectrum evolving. But I think Hui Chen spoke about this in a piece of written work or a post around the fact that, you know, we shouldn't be overly focused on the pause of, say, FCPA in and of itself. This is such a great opportunity for us to show the value that ethics and compliance has as a whole. And when we focus on doing business in the right way, as opposed to culture of compliance, we do things because we feel like we have to, i.e. there's a law in place or regulatory compliance that forces us to do so, or we're scared of getting into trouble. Again, a law is going to end up punishing us in some way. That's not really to our benefit. And so this is a great time for practitioners to ask themselves what really matters and how does the work that I do have an impact on society as a whole? Am I doing this just to earn money because it's a job and pay the bills? Heck yeah, sure, we've all got bills. But also at the end of the day, this is a job that we can be really proud of and a profession that we can be proud to be in, because we're shaping honest and ethical business practices. Our work is focused on doing the right thing. At the end of the day, we can look ourselves in the mirror because we've done a job that we can be proud of.
Yeah, and interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot, just like everybody. And I also think that no matter what's going on in the world, people at the end of the day, I mean, even before that, I know if I was like in trainings or other things, you're like, what do I need to know? And people may not think in the nuances we are. But with that said, everybody wants to feel that they're working in a place where the person they look to sitting next to them or on a call cares about doing the right thing, and your company does. And I think it's how a lot of people don't care whether or not what laws exist, but they do care about doing the right thing. And I don't know if you think it's helping us integrate ourselves even further into other functions or keeping ourselves more separate. I don't know if you have a view on that.
I love the idea of us integrating generally in terms of not sticking out like a sore thumb and having everybody fall over us as an obstacle. I do still value, of course, the idea of compliance being an independent and empowered function. And if we get too immersed into other departments, I think that's threatened somewhat. Being able to do things like just-in-time training so that compliance appears at, or reminders and education appear at just the right moment, that kind of immersion, I think, is wonderful.
Yeah, I do too. I also think recently, as my organization was talking about different technology or things to use it, so you maybe in finance or other things, we talked about a seat at the table in leadership, but having a seat in the table at how do you best want to do this thing or implement it or use it, and having compliance considerations in there, I think is positive. I agree with you. We need to have, we can't be so ingrained in any of that we can't be impartial or objective or look at what's best from our ethics and compliance standpoint. So
totally agree.
Yeah. One of the other things that, and I've mentioned this earlier, and we'll talk about it a little bit, is, and it was so fun when I look up Mary Shirley on AI, so I could see some of the other things that you've done recently and some of the questions. that one of the things that came up was, which reminded me, your list of questions for job seekers about compliance programs and a culture of integrity. It also listed all of them. And I will say, just I can't remember all of your cheat codes. I can't remember I didn't remember all of them till I read them. But what do you think, looking back on that list, is your most revealing one, and why?
Yeah, for me, I like the question, what deliverables have been rewarded that the compliance program has been responsible for, and in what way by the company? So what you're getting at by asking that question in a job interview is understanding the importance that's placed on compliance and exactly what the company values when it comes to ethical business practices. What was your most revealing question in the list, Lisa?
My most revealing question was, can I talk to my predecessor? Whether it's a direct one or not. I mean, and I know there are situations where that may not be something, but there's usually, there would be a valid reason. But most of the time, if you can talk to that person, it tells me a couple things. One, you can get a sense of what's happening in the organization. It also shows that succession, whether it's because someone left or someone was promoted or doing something different, is encouraged, and also that transparency is important, that you can feel like there's not just something that someone has decided to do that's being hidden from you. I think that was really interesting. And I also think it helps you to find out, one of the things I think is really important, and I'd love to get your view on this, is this idea of when people hire somebody in a role, and even, chief compliance officer or something else, that is basically their way of fixing the problem. They're not wanting to do anything else. Like you said, we need a compliance program, so now we have a chief compliance officer. And when that person then comes in, they can't hire, they can't get the systems, they can't do things. So I think that helps to understand some of that stuff.
Yeah, so putting them in the position of basically being on a glass cliff, which unfortunately, if I'm not mistaken, I believe studies have shown that women are more likely to be promoted into those types of positions, basically setting someone up to fail from the outset. But it looks good initially, like, great, we're putting a woman into this executive position. So prima facie looks like a positive. And then next thing you know, her hands are absolutely tied, which of course becomes more disastrous when she has to step away, unable to fix the problems, head down, tail between her legs. Horrible.
Right. And then they'll hire someone else to come in, and then they'll offer different resources, ability. Like, what do you need to do this job? Whether it's true or not. But I do think that it is important for that. You are one of my more cutting edge thought leader friends.
Oh, stop.
You are.
Love it. Thank you.
And like I mentioned earlier, we'll be seeing you really soon at SCCE at the CEI, which is in your new hometown of Nashville. And you and our good, good friend, great gentleman in compliance, Matt Kelly, are presenting what is AI governance for noobs. I like how you have the zeros in there as well. And
it's legit.
Yeah, no, it's true. For the non-tech compliance protection. Non-tech compliance practitioner. Say that a few times fast on Sunday, and that will be kicking things off. And it is right after the Buffalo Bills game for anyone who's worried about that. But what are some of the things you'll be covering for the audience, for all of us to think about?
Yeah, well, I'm so looking forward to welcoming you and all of the compliance community to Nashville. We're going to have so much comfort food and live music. It's going to be fantastic. So for our session, we want it to be a friendly, approachable place for the compliance practitioner who perhaps doesn't feel like technology is their thing, and that perhaps they've even been a little hesitant to deep dive into it. And as always, when Matt Kelly is around, I think there's going to be a lot of thought-provoking discussion and issues raised by him that'll really challenge us to be on the front foot as we think about incorporating AI governance into our programs and creating frameworks in our organization. So a little spoiler from me, some of the things that I'll be talking about are around implementation of your AI governance committee. And asking some questions that I think are important for us to consider. So, for example, do you have an existing committee that the AI one can seamlessly become a part of, rather than setting up a new committee just for AI? And on that specific topic of AI, do you want it to be more scalable than just an AI governance committee? Or do you want it to be broader, taking into account other things that may pop up in the future? And think about naming the committee something along the lines of emerging technology or innovative technology, instead of keeping it narrow to AI. So we'll be working through some of the pragmatic questions and logistics, if you will, of setting up an AI governance framework that companies of all sizes are grappling with at the moment.
And I'm laughing as you talk about the basic approach, because I'm talking about data analytics there. And
Yes.
I wanted to call it data analytics for dummies, and I'm the dummy. But thinking about it, we do use all of them. But it's another thing, I think, like AI or technology, that people try to make sound like this unbelievably complicated, difficult thing, and then ignore, and you can't figure out how to implement it. So that's one of the reasons I'm excited to listen to you all, is what even talking about what is or isn't scalable, or even with committees, as you just mentioned. I think that's really important. But I also making sure that you get onto the right committee or put the right group together. And one of the things that I think you've talked about is how ethics and compliance people are being welcomed as partners in AI. I feel like a lot of times we're trying to push to be there, and somehow now I think the ethics of it are so significant. The regulations are moving so quickly. So what do you think? Why do you think this is happening? And then the follow-up will be, is how do we make sure different compliance professionals at all levels make sure they get and maintain that seat?
Yeah. GAN Integrity did a survey a little while ago about AI, AI governance implementation in organizations. And one of the statistics from that survey indicates that 25% of the respondents have compliance in the lead of implementing AI governance and taking care of AI risks within their organizations. So I think it helps that if a quarter of us have a seat at the head of the table, of course, that's great. I think that's been a big part of it. But I also think the DOJ guidance that was released in September 2024, specifically at the SCCE conference last year, when they talked about their expectations around compliance professionals having a role and responsibilities for AI governance, even if you've got an IT team trying to urinate on the territory and say, no, AI, we own AI, this is ours, compliance practitioners can very easily point to that and say, cool, we acknowledge your subject matter expertise and to the extent to which this is a technical subject. However, a lot of what we're dealing with is actually the risk here, right? Like mitigating that and putting in place controls and a framework to deal with that risk. And frankly, that's our area. And if you don't find us compelling, perhaps you'll find DOJ compelling instead. So I think those two things are helpful. And then to your second question of how can we make sure that we stay comfortable in that seat and don't get wheeled off and out the door at any point, I think compliance practitioners should be thinking about how they can best drive the process forward in an unknown area. So demonstrate your value by making suggestions as to what to do next. Be the one saying, okay, next steps are this. I'll set up a meeting for us to reconvene on our progress in 2 weeks, whatever it is, right? So you're driving it forward, because this really is, to a certain extent, unknown for everybody at the table. So why not the heck let it be you as the one being the driving force? And remember, we've been through this kind of thing before. I see it very much like how we were playing with data analytics as a concept in 2019. At the Compliance Week conference of May 2019, I think everybody felt like they were behind in data analytics, but when a panel asked everybody to put their hands up in terms of what progress they were making and where they were up to, there were a lot less people advanced than what you assumed. And so this is the same. I think, of course, we're all going to be at different stages, but believing that you're the one that's behind or that you can't add value because you've not done this before, no, bollocks. We can all be thinking and strategizing on this. We've got each other to call on as well, do some peer norming with folks. Doesn't matter if they're in a different industry to you, we're all dealing with largely the same types of issues. Pay attention to folks like Matt Kelly. He's written a lot on it. and start making suggestions. I think that's the way in which you're going to show your value and act with confidence. Why not?
I also think part of it is the risks are unknown. You keep talking, you
Yeah.
were mentioning that, and
Yeah.
all of us, none of us exactly know where this is going or what it's doing. So it
Yeah.
isn't like in some of the other situations, like whether it's data or something else, that experts feel like they might own this, or people will be trying to overwhelm you with their knowledge, because we see problems that happen all the time, opportunity, and it's moving so fast. I wonder if that isn't what's making us uniquely suited to do it. So instead of talking
Yeah.
about bribery, corruption, or law and regulations, we're actually having to be on the front end of figuring out what it means.
Yeah. And why not us over anybody else in the company? There is nothing stopping you from being the one in the lead.
Yeah. Which is something that you've taught a lot of us and taught me, and you're in the lead right now. So I think it's
Oh, Lisa.
really, exciting.
Thank
If
you.
there's anything over your journey over the last few years of lessons that you've thought about recently, or we talked a little about what you've done at the beginning that you'd want to share, especially in this chief role.
Sometimes what I've been reminding myself of recently is just if I'm feeling emboldened about something and I hesitate before doing it and I think, would a man do this? And if the answer is yes, I just do it.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's something from the beginning of when we started this podcast, it was one of the things. And, we had our origin story, but this is a little bit of the fun part of reflecting to me. But when I think about the first 200 episodes, do you have any specific, I have a couple of non-substantive, non-law, but podcast related memories that stick out to me. I wanted to see what for you, if you have any of those that really are top of mind.
Beyond the origin story, which is probably the one that sticks out the most, it's kind of related. And it's that very first day where you had flown out to Boston, which was my home at the time. And you and Matt came to my apartment building. We had a meeting room booked. And you and I just sat there so earnestly with no real idea as to what we were getting ourselves into, but just this optimism and this feeling of we can do this. There is a gap in the market for this. We don't know what we're doing yet, but we're going to figure out how to get there. And where we don't know, we're going to research, we're going to lean on friends. And Matt was super patient with explaining things to us, giving us tips and encouraging us. And I think that's probably my next favorite memory, and one that sticks out of my mind so much, is you and I just coming in with the absolute seriousness of, okay, this is new for us. What are we doing? And we had our first episodes, which frankly were probably awful. And I can say for me, I've never gone back to listen to them, and I never will. So thank you to those of you who stuck with us from the beginning, and you did listen to those and still carried on, and to those lovely guests who allowed us to basically use them as guinea pigs. That's such a big thing for me. The trust that other people put in us as well is so heartwarming. So that's my favorite one. Lisa, do you have a story to share on this?
Yeah, the trust and the support, that's huge. Mine is a little bit shallower, but that seems very opportune for the week that's coming up. We were, as you mentioned, we were very serious and earnest about a number of things. And we were asked, what cover art, what this? And they asked us about our theme music. And we spent about 2 days going through every bit of popular music, like I Wanted Girls by Beyonce. Then we came up with something else. But you and I finally agreed on Dolly Parton's 9 to 5. And
perfect.
then as soon as we brought that up, people asked if we had even thought about the copyright or other consequences, which clearly they told us pick a song. We took it. And I have forgiven her for not getting back to us, but I may try to find her in the next couple of weeks, since we haven't been able to use it yet.
If we can spare some time, I feel like it would be well worth our effort to track Dolly down and give her a second shot at allowing us, well, it's not even us anymore, it would be you and Hema, the chance to use
That's not the point.
9 to 5 as her theme song. It's the most disappointing thing she's ever done, is ghosting our earnest question.
Yeah. To be fair, I guess the fact that she does give books to all of the children in school and things like that, I'm not upset with her like some other things that we might have over the years thought was a snub or not appropriate. I'm bigger than that. The other,
I don't know if I am.
I'm pretty sure you are. It's Dolly. She's a national
Love her.
treasure.
She is.
So,
I think she's actually a worldwide treasure.
that's true. That's
Mm.
true. And the other one for me is just a little bit is when you and I both ended up through work in South Africa at the same time and had dinner. Not just was that fun, but how incredible, I think, when you talk about community, is that
Yeah.
you and I met at an SCCE conference, I think in 2017, maybe.
Mm.
I feel like this was a great presentation about how to do training and other things in Asia. And then
Mm.
years later, you're in the US, we have a podcast, and there we are, happen to have dinner in Cape Town at a fabulous
Yeah.
restaurant. So
Yes, and we joked about, I remember a social media post about, your podcast is a success when you're able to have like your board dinner in Cape Town.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so,
that was a lovely evening.
it was. And I just think that when I think about that and where the podcast has gone now, it is such a community. And
Yeah,
at all this time later, and before, because I just want to thank you because
thank you.
it still remains to have changed my life and
Mm.
grown so many interesting things for it. And thank you for coming and being a guest today.
It's a pleasure. I'm really pleased to be here. I think I literally said I'm thrilled 3 times in the opening there, but it's a privilege to be invited back, to be associated with the great work that you continue to do. And thank you for your friendship and support that has continued so strongly over the last couple of years since I departed the podcast, but not each other's lives.
No, yeah, that was never going to happen, even though, if, as you recall correctly, some people really kept coming to us at the first conference after this, wondering if there was scandal. Remember
Well,
that?
I actually do wonder if some people thought that we were in a romantic relationship, to be honest. I think that
Yeah, that's possible too.
some people had misunderstood that, which is slightly amusing, just confirming that Lisa Fine and I did not have a romantic breakup, all is well.
But to be fair, just to go back to women in compliance, people don't have that assumption when 2 men do something and they go on to do different business things.
True.
The first thought is not, this is a dramatic thing. It's, oh, interesting. And I do think that says a lot about society to some degree, no matter even the best intentions.
Yeah, and how seriously women are still taken in 2025.
Yeah. But more seriously because of you. So thank you so much for being here. And on behalf of HEMA and the Compliance Podcast Network and Corporate Compliance Insights, have a great day and thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Compliance Podcast Network. Start your mornings with daily compliance news, quick, sharp updates on the top compliance and ethics stories in under 5 minutes every morning in Compliance Podcast Network. Because compliance never sleeps. Need practical advice fast? Check out Compliance Tip of the Day. One actionable idea to level up your program. Short and sweet. Every day on Compliance Podcast Network. Got 10 minutes? We've got the week's top 10 stories. 10 for 10 brings you the big compliance headlines. Fast, fun, and focused. Every Saturday on Compliance Podcast Network. And don't miss the Sunday Book Review, where compliance meets culture through must-read books and big ideas every Sunday in Compliance Podcast Network. Whether you're in the office, on a walk, or commuting, stay smart, stay ethical, stay tuned. Only on the Compliance Podcast Network. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.